Today we're talking to a guy named Matt Cannon. Matt is a guy I've known since he was a recent MBA grad, hospital intern 17, 18, 19 years ago. So I've seen him go from hospital intern to being a corporate division level leader over 80 specialty hospitals and about $2 billion in revenue with direct responsibility for that portfolio. His insights are interesting. He's grown up in an extremely high accountability, investor-owned healthcare environment where you can't fake it, and your political savvy is not going to get you to the top unless you've got the goods to back it up. Matt is a great guy. He's highly authentic, and I think an interaction with him would be helpful for all of us. So sit back, stay tuned. Here's Matt Cannon.
You are now listening to the Stark Lane podcast.
You know, I just saw an interesting quote. They said life begins at 40, and everything you do up until that point is just research. But you wouldn't know about that.
Yeah, that's very true. Still a few years away from it. And I even remember it being called halftime when getting to 40, so I'm not even to halftime yet. So it's guess you're kind of looking forward to it and seeing what the other side is, but still a few years to go there.
So you're today you're 38, right? 37.
No, I'm 38. Yeah, 38. It is funny. I used to always think about I used to always wonder as a kid when you'd ask your parents how old they are and they couldn't remember on their birthday. And then I'm here now where I'm having to do the math and work backwards. So yeah, 38, turned 39 later this year. So it's funny to get to that point to where, I mean, you think about it, especially until I turned 30, like every year was like, you're looking forward, like I'm going to turn this age. And I still have kids that are playing. She wanted to celebrate her half birthday last week. So didn't know that was still a thing, but I guess at that age you celebrate those as well.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny too because you're in an industry that generally speaking is a little bit older. You know, I had to dig really, really deep to find stats on the average age of a hospital CEO. First-time CEOs, 57, and that's an aggregate of a bunch of different surveys that I ran through Grok, you know, the XAI.
Right.
And I think the average is about 59. So you're nowhere near that. And I know from being a guy who's worked a lot of healthcare that it's not super easy coming up when you're half everyone's age.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. I mean, I think I've received my first CEO title of CEO of a hospital at the age of 25. And at that time, I had friends, and you'd be in a social setting and things like that. And they're like, oh, hey, my friend's like, he's the CEO of the hospital. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about that. And it was always kind of a fun game because no one ever believed you if you told them that anyways. And so it was more of you just kind of kept that down because it just seemed impossible to do that. But it's fun at that time because you had to always do things different. So what I mean by that is, if you think, like from a leadership standpoint, when I entered the workforce as an executive, everybody that reported up underneath me, they had kids my age or older. Some of them even had grandkids older than me. And so it was a very unique situation to be able to ask them, lead them, help guide them down a direction to where they've been in their career for longer than I've been alive. So trying to figure out how to maximize that potential without them feeling like, hey, this kid's telling me what to do. How do they know anything? Because I've been in this industry longer than they've been alive. So it's always kind of fun to evolve and to try and figure out how to maximize that potential of everyone.
Awesome, man. No, I totally get it. And it's not without a few bumps and bruises and scars. I remember I was 26 and I walked into the corporate headquarters of the hospital organization who put me on my first big retained executive search assignment where I would be finding all of their C-level people down in Atlanta. And I was sitting in the lobby in a suit that cost way too much. I had cut just for that event. And the CEO came out, walked in the middle of the lobby, looked around. He looked me right in the eye and he turned around and walked back and shut the door. I was like, oh man. Okay. So I went, and this was before, I'm obviously, I think I've got a few years on you. So this was before texting, and texting wouldn't even be cool back then. But
No.
I didn't have email and all that on my phone. So I went back up to the receptionist. I said, oh yeah, you know, so and so he came out. I have an appointment, it's 5 after. I'm here, so he came back out, and when he did the same thing, and he was turned around, went to go walking back, and I yelled his name, and he looked back. He said, my God, I was expecting your father. But it was a great way to start the conversation. I think at that point my youth was sort of a nice icebreaker. But
Yeah.
I'm sure you don't have any stories like
Well,
that.
I mean, the irony is too is that you're taught in the HR world that you can never ask that question. But it's amazing that when the roles are reversed, everyone has no problem asking you that question. And yeah, I mean, one of the things that I guess from an eight, well, there's multiple stories, but one that was kind of funny is I had a materials manager that I worked with in South Texas, and it was my birthday, and she came over to wish me happy birthday. It was very nice of her, but she had no filter. And her first question was, "Well, how old are you? How old are you turning?" And I was turning 24. But I didn't want to tell her. I didn't know. And it's always a fun game at that age because you ask them, "Well, how old do you think I am?" And 99% of the time, they don't want to insult you, so they're going to say like 30, 35. It's always higher, not even close. And her response was 18. I'm like, all right, well, do I look that young? And so it was just kind of a self-awareness opportunity too, to where, I mean, she was an outlier in that situation, but just recognizing the fact of what I could be perceived at. And so you wouldn't call it a chip on your shoulder or anything like that, but you had to work twice as hard to make sure that you got the buy-in and the engagement. Because I looked around at a lot of different leaders that I either were peers with at the time, mentors, anything like that. And a lot of their respect and leadership that people followed, it wasn't because they were charismatic, everyone just loved them or anything like that. It was because the positional authority they had, and it was assumed because of their age that they had the experience to be successful and to be followed by.
Mhm.
So when you don't have that look, you have to figure out how to work twice as hard to give them that confidence that, hey, I've got your back. I'm going to help support you and get you to where you want to go. And in turn, that's going to help us get to where we want to go as an organization.
That's an awesome segue, and you just answered one of my questions because I know the companies at which you have worked since you were an MBA hospital administration intern. And these aren't companies where you can fly to the top by being politically savvy. I mean, these are high accountability, investor owned environments where you have to do right by patients, you have to do right by people, and then obviously you have to know the business and be able to run things as efficiently and operationally perfect as possible. It's not an easy environment. So getting to where you are now, how did you get there by 38?
Well, I think a couple things. One is what I was taught coming out of grad school, because I had the age issue right out of grad school. I finished up around 2008, 2008 undergrad, 2010 for grad school. And part of the reason for going to grad school was because 2008 happened. And I remember, and I tell this story a lot too to people that want to give up, is I applied for over 75 jobs and while I was finishing up my MBA. And I can count on one hand how many interviews I got. And they were entry level executive training type programs to where there's a lot of these that exist throughout the country and are designed for people like myself at that time to have that opportunity. But what had happened was, due to the recession, you saw a lot of the workforce changing to where you had people that were 15, 20 years older getting that same, being given those opportunities because they had experience otherwise. And so they were taking less risk by um, having that opportunity to start over. And then compound that with, I was taught very early on that if you're willing to do things that no one else is willing to do, willing to relocate to where no one else is willing to relocate, you'll be given opportunities that otherwise you'll have to wait a long time for. And so that's how I ended up in South Texas to start my career. Is it was a market that isn't a destination market, or it wasn't at that time. Like you basically had opportunities for people like myself. You had opportunities for people that were born and raised in that market, and then you had people that it was towards the end of their career that was where they were going to finish it up. And so you have that from the objective standpoint of really using that principle of take the opportunities that no one else is willing to say yes to. I mean, that's how I went from South Texas to then to Houston, then up to Michigan, which I had never even really lived. I had never been to the state of Michigan when I accepted that job. And then moving on to Minnesota because I just wanted to torture myself even more with cold weather after living in basically paradise in the South.
That is an entirely new brand of cold. Minneapolis
Yeah.
is rough. Whew.
Well, I always joke too. I had a truck that I bought in South Texas, and it went with me all the way up to Michigan throughout the years. And I've seen that the thermostat or the that says the temperature for the outside. I saw it as high as 117 in South Texas, and I saw it as low as -40 in Michigan. It's like, oh, that truck has been through a lot and it's still held up. So it was, I mean, you take those things, really kind of just bringing it back with taking those opportunities, but then how do you maximize those opportunities? It's one thing to go somewhere and do this, but you still have to capitalize on it. And I think it's understanding what the goals are. And what kind of drew me into healthcare was I enjoy business, I enjoy operating and making things better, but I enjoy people. And so when I did an internship in healthcare, it it became a quick realization that your success in running this particular business is just by motivating and supporting that team. And so that's what I was able to do. And even going back to that leadership with the age difference is you start really thinking about how you're, what do they want? What are their goals? What are their problems? What are their challenges? And how do I support it? I don't stand in your way. I'll be there right by your side. I'm not going to be an absent leader and just let you do your thing. But I want to make sure I understand where you are headed, and then I'll communicate and teach you where us as an organization are trying to head, and let's blend it together. And guess what? More times than not, we want to go to the same place, and you end up getting the results you're looking for.
So you don't sit behind a computer all day with your feet on the desk, making decisions and sending texts to people telling them what to do.
No, I'm almost an old soul to where, like, even though there's a ton of email traffic and texting and phone calls and things like that, and most of the people I work with are spread out throughout the country. I mean, that face-to-face interaction, there's nothing better than that. And I also think it's a lot more efficient. I mean, I can have a 30-second conversation, just you and I, and we'll get more done than the 30 emails to communicate the exact same thing in the back and forth.
Totally agree. That's almost a lost art these days.
Yeah.
You know, when I'm talking to people, new people who don't know me, and in the executive search world, you know, when I'm soliciting interest, you know, people are just blown away that I need to have a conversation in real time.
Right.
Like, yeah, no, sorry. There's a lot more than just paper. We've got to qualify a lot of items, and very few of them you can put on a resume. You
Yeah.
know,
And it's hard to, I mean, and people lose sight of that, especially in healthcare. I mean, the whole business is taking care of people. So if you're taking the people out of it, I mean, are you really doing anything to help?
So I think that's a good segue. I'd like to talk a little bit about what you do now before we run out of time. So you've got a ton of hospitals, post-acute hospitals, so long-term acute care and acute rehabilitation. You've got freestanding hospitals, hospitals within a hospital. You've got joint ventured hospitals with major academic teaching institutions, which I think is so cool. Tell me a little bit about what you do every day and what that looks like.
Yeah, so I mean, we kind of check the box on all those different scenarios, whether totally owned operations, as you said, hospital within a hospital, or freestanding, the joint ventures, it anything and everything from a structure of running a healthcare operation, we somehow touch, and I somehow am involved in that. But I mean, as a day-to-day operation, it's you're really working from a strategy standpoint to execute on goals. I mean, we're we have a vision that I helped to instill and come up with, and we want to maximize that, and we want to make sure that we're focused on those employees so that they can deliver that great care with those patients, because that's kind of how the business runs. Is if we're taking care of people, like I said earlier. And I'd say a lot of my time this day is about how do we grow the business? Where do we see healthcare headed? I mean, we fortunately or unfortunately, starting out in the LTAC world, we've, ever since I entered the industry, it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's under attack because that's not fair, but it had struggled for an identity crisis. And we were in 2013 able to kind of help give it an identity, but then you're working on a value proposition of how does the world know what it is? I mean, back then I used to say from an LTAC perspective is you only knew about what an LTAC was is if you worked in it or if you had a family member that was there. Other than that,
Hmm.
it was never on your radar. And I think post-acute was that way. And you've seen it migrate just from a cost structure standpoint alone when you view and you see this, and that's why the partnerships are so huge, is these large academic systems and large not-for-profits and even for-profits, they all see the value in post-acute in lowering that cost structure to take care of those patients and doing it in a way that is beneficial for the patient and then fiscally responsible too. And so it gives additional opportunities.
So the post-acute hospital industry is near and dear to my heart. It is not necessarily the biggest part of our portfolio, but I've had a heavy footprint in it for, I think, 20 something years now.
Yeah.
And it's a market where, and I think people should understand, it's you don't go to an emergency department to go to a rehab hospital or a long-term acute care hospital. You know, you have liaisons or marketers who are out in the field working with case managers and physicians saying, "Hey, this is who we are and this is what we do." And it's funny, even a lot of those providers don't necessarily know what these post-acute entities, these hospitals can do for the patients until they're, I think educated or it's brought to their attention, like put right here in front of their face because, it's not a sexy mainstream thing in the news, right? It's
Right.
not something celebrated on everybody's Facebook feed, but it's a critical part of the continuum. These hospitals that are very specifically designed for one thing, to take care of these particular patients. I love what you do. I'm a huge supporter of the industry. I will be until I die. And I do like seeing what you are doing and what others are doing in terms of giving this post-acute hospital industry more of an identity, a very specific identity versus a general sort of, over there with every other clinical and non-clinical sports service type entity.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of exciting even to see the evolution since I started, what, 16, 17 years ago, which is wild to say in its own right, as we were talking about age. But I mean, the success stories we have now and the evolution of the types of patients we take. I mean, you think about the LTAC industry and where it's gone, you couldn't define what it was that we took as patients. And didn't matter which company you worked for. It was just like, hey, we're trying to meet a length of stay of 25 days or greater. And we're going to try and get some good outcomes. Well, now, I mean, it's really evolved to where I mean, you're taking a patient that ends up in the ICU with a pretty serious situation. They're spending at a minimum 3 days in there, and they're usually in there for at least a week to 2 weeks. And in the past, those patients would probably stay there a lot longer. They would end up on a med surge floor, and they just would kind of get stuck in the continuum. And instead, they're coming to us. They're coming on ventilators. So maybe they haven't even been. They're still intubated, orally intubated, and within a month, these patients. I mean, I think we still average greater than 25% of our those patients entering our hospital are going home.
That's
Another
insane.
20,
That is so
another
awesome. These
another
are
20.
really, really sick people, everyone. I mean, really, really sick people. They have one of the conditions of participation is a minimum of a 3-day ICU stay. So you're not getting everyone with a headache or, a bump on the knee at a long-term acute care hospital. And when they are vent dependent, Matt is talking about vent dependent people and sending 25% of these people home. That's huge.
Yeah, and just kind of piggyback off of that, these are patients that they failed to be able to wean in the ICU. Like a lot of times they've been
Hmm.
written off as that, hey, we can't get your family member off the vent. And they come to us, we get them off the vent. We're getting, like I said, roughly 25%, depending on the hospital, are going home. But then to that post acute, I mean, with us having our inpatient rehab as well, and then from this joint venture strategy, we're able to discharge 25 plus percent to of those vent patients. If you're just following me through that continuum, they're ending
Hmm.
up in the inpatient rehab for another 2 weeks or so, and then they're walking out of the hospital. So, I mean, that story to tell that is completely different than what it was 15 years ago, to where I used to say that like I was scared if I ever had a family member in an LTAC setting because life was never going to be the same. If they could get back to 25 to 50% of where they were before they entered the hospital and went through that long road to recovery, that was success. And you're finding that as we've continued to evolve and be able to provide this level of care, um, and the collaboration from a physician standpoint and from a clinical standpoint, a rehab standpoint, you're getting to where these patients are, you're seeing that success to where a lot of them can get back almost to where they were before they ended up in that episode of care. So that's exciting, and it's refreshing, it's rewarding. I always tell our staff too, especially when you're talking about the business development teams, is because we are 100% referral driven. We don't have ERs that we are admitting through that patients show up, and then that's how you go about taking care of these patients. It is 100% referral driven. Like you need physicians, you need acute care partners to buy into what level of care you provide, and you run with it. But I always tell them in those situations that every referral you get is a direct correlation to the level of care we provide. So they are validating every time they send you a recommendation of a potential admission that they believe in what we do every day. And I think it's exciting, and we lose sight of that stuff because we just go through our day-to-day operations and do what we're supposed to do. But you kind of have to center that to give them that opportunity to remember why we're doing what we're doing.
It's refreshing to talk to someone who really believes in what they do, especially someone like you, who I'm quite confident is going to be shaping the future of the industry. So, on that note, what does the future look like for the post-acute hospital industry? You're one of the guys who's going to shape it, just being totally real. So, I mean, if you could do it and you could shape it in a way that is, brings the most value to the most people and makes the most economic sense within realistic constraints of American regulatory compliance, what does that look like?
Yeah, well, it's crazy to even think about. I appreciate the compliment there. I don't really think of it that way, um, but to answer the question, I think I think you're going to continue to see post-acute grow, and for various reasons. One is the baby boomer generation is the largest generation, and they're headed right into that age of the Medicare population. And when you got the largest generation headed towards basically what is why post-acute exists, from whether LTAC, rehab, skilled nursing, I mean, you home health, you can name them all, outpatient, like all those different things, it it's going to naturally grow because there's just going to be more patients that need that level of care. Of course, you have the constraints of the regulatory piece. You have a funding challenge in DC that's always up for grabs. That is not going to be fixed overnight, and it never will be, most likely. It's just how can you make the most of it? And I think where we're headed and where I see it headed is, can you continue to share the message of what it is we do? Because when it's very easy to get believers in this if they get the chance. And I think it's understanding the cost structure too, because you still have to be fiscally responsible. And that's part of the challenge in all of this is, how can you continue to take care of patients that need care, but be able to do it in a way that you can afford to keep the doors open and reinvest in that? And so that seems to be missing. And I think where I'm focused and where our organization is, where can we continue to be able to impact the service you're providing without, like, you see these things when a company struggles, what's the first thing they do? They cut labor. Well, we're in the business to where we can't cut labor. Like, we run as efficient as we can, and it's not fair to the staff to do that, and it's not fair to the patient to try and do that. And it's not safe. I mean, simply put, that's why you have some of these things in there. And so it's really about being innovative. It's about recognizing the fact that we have more data, we've seen more patients. I mean, we take care of, I think as an organization, it's over 100,000 patients a day, when you factor in the different lines of business. But when you have that much data, how can you learn from it and leverage that? And I think that's where you're going to have to go. You have to be strategic to think about, I mean, the electronic medical record hadn't even started whenever I got into this industry. Joking about texting and emails earlier, that now, I mean, the technology and I mean, I even think back, and this is kind of a sidetrack, but it's funny, starting out in South Texas, and you're trying to maintain compliance with the hospital, and you're going around with your medical records team chasing down doctors to make sure they signed orders and date. It was dated and timed, and how specific it was. It was legible, all these different things to maintain compliance. And now with medical record, with it being electronic, they don't have to do any of it. So you have that efficiency that you gained in something as simple as that. And so you just have to constantly evaluate and look at different job performances that you're doing and different supplies that you're using. You name it, and ask yourself, we did that 10 years ago for this reason. Is that still a valid reason to continue on that? And I think it's challenging the status quo. As cliche as that is, that's where the focus is how can we get better? How can we kind of be the tip of the spear and leading that direction that we want to head?
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
I totally get it. Innovation. And I think there's plenty of room for cleanup. And I think cleanup work also falls under the innovation category. And when you're talking about EMRs, I think about the sea of EMRs that came into existence around meaningful use 1 and 2, and hospitals all over the country who have systems that don't talk to themselves internally, let alone the hospital next door or the hospital to which they refer patients for post-acute care. So I think there's a ton of opportunity there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a simple task. It's a complicated solution, but you're basically trying to take care of a patient. There's going to be a lot more patients in the future, as we just talked about, and you're trying to do it as efficiently, as cost effectively as possible, and still maintaining a high outcome and a high service, so that the patient has a great experience. And so as long as you're striving towards that, I think anything's fair game on that table. And to your point, the efficiencies that are out there, you want to empower your team and frontline staff and anybody and everybody to be able to raise their voice and raise their hand if they see something that could be an opportunity, because that's where all those things come from. It's not from someone at the top that sees that just has some vision that no one else can do. With people at the top that are successful, they have a communication line to where people can share those things with them, and they feel comfortable bringing up those solutions and feel that they're a part of the solution. So it goes back to that alignment and buy-in. Like, you get that, it's amazing what you can accomplish and how quickly you can too. And I think that's what people don't realize. You can do it very, very quickly if you've got alignment.
Well, Matt, you've made some great points. Thank you for joining us today. Before we leave here, I have tremendous respect for what you've done in your career. And I hope at this point you'll put a picture on LinkedIn. I don't think you have to hide behind a title. People can know you're a young gun, because you've done amazing things for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. It is funny though, because I legitimately have never put a picture on LinkedIn, and for until at least I was 30. I mean, it was because of everything I had said earlier, focusing on the age, is that you go and look at that and you're sized up and never even get an opportunity to show your worth. So it was better just to kind of be in the dark, let them guess on that. And now it just kind of became a running joke, and it was just lack of focus on needing to put a picture up there. But I think maybe I can accomplish that for some people, and
Well,
go ahead and put that out there.
wear that under 40 badge proudly. Just FYI for everyone, it's going to be my personal mission to get you on a few 40 under 40 lists, because I think you've done amazing work, and I think you deserve the recognition.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it means a lot.
Awesome, man. We'll let you get back to work.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
This has been the Stark Lane podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever you find the programs to elevate your career and your passions. Now, get back to work.